The news that every Dodgers fan has been dreading since the moment Shohei Ohtani first picked up a baseball this season has just arrived. Ohtani has injured his right arm. He will miss tomorrow's game. And after being rushed to the hospital for an MRI, the results have come back with a finding that has sent shockwaves through the entire baseball world. Serious damage to his biceps. Not a minor strain that gets managed with rest and treatment over a few days. Serious damage. The kind of language attached to a diagnosis that forces an entire organization to completely reassess everything it thought it knew about the road ahead. And then manager Dave Roberts stood in front of the cameras and said something that nobody in that room was expecting to hear. He apologized. He looked directly into those cameras and said, "I am sorry for keeping it under wraps." 5 words that tell you this injury did not happen overnight. 5 words that tell you the Dodgers organization has been managing this situation quietly behind closed doors for longer than anyone outside that clubhouse realized. And now the entire baseball world knows the truth. Ohtani is hurt. The cause has been revealed. And the most important question in all of professional sports right now is what happens next. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that Ohtani had injured his right arm and that the MRI revealed serious damage to his biceps specifically? The location of this injury is what makes it so genuinely alarming for anyone who understands the mechanics of what Ohtani does on a baseball field. The biceps is not just any muscle. For a pitcher of Ohtani's type, someone who generates elite velocity through an explosive combination of hip rotation, shoulder engagement, and arm acceleration, the biceps plays a critical role in the deceleration phase of the throwing motion. Every time Ohtani releases a pitch at 99 miles per hour, his body has to absorb and redirect an enormous amount of force in the fraction of a second after the ball leaves his hand. The biceps is one of the primary structures involved in managing that force. When there is serious damage in that area, it affects not just how a pitcher throws but whether he can throw at all without risking further and potentially career-altering injury. Let's talk about Roberts' admission that the organization had been keeping this under wraps. Because this is the detail that changes the entire narrative of what we thought we knew about the last several weeks of this season. When a manager of Roberts' experience and professionalism stands up and apologizes publicly for concealing information about a player's health, it means one of two things. Either the situation developed more rapidly than the organization was able to communicate responsibly, or the Dodgers made a deliberate decision to manage this information carefully because they believed Ohtani could continue to compete at an acceptable level of risk while the injury was being monitored. Either scenario raises questions that every Dodgers fan deserves honest answers to. And Roberts' apology is the first step toward providing those answers. From a medical perspective, how does a biceps injury of this severity typically develop in a pitcher who has been competing at the level Ohtani has been competing at this season? This is important to understand because serious biceps damage in a starting pitcher almost never appears without warning. There are almost always precursors. Subtle changes in velocity that the radar gun picks up before anyone publicly acknowledges a problem. Slight adjustments in mechanics that pitching coaches notice but attribute to normal variation rather than compensation for discomfort. Moments where a pitcher shakes out his arm between pitches or adjusts his grip in ways that suggest something is not quite right. Looking back now at Ohtani's recent starts with this knowledge of what the MRI revealed, certain things that might have seemed insignificant in the moment take on an entirely different meaning. The Dodgers organization was clearly aware that something was developing. Roberts' apology confirms that. What does this mean for Ohtani as a hitter in the immediate short term? Because this is a dimension of the injury that gets overlooked in the initial shock of the pitching implications. Ohtani is not just a pitcher. He is one of the most dangerous hitters in the entire National League. He bats every single day regardless of whether he is pitching. And swinging a baseball bat at the kind of elite level that Ohtani operates at places its own significant demands on the biceps of the lead arm. For a right-handed hitter like Ohtani, the left arm generates much of the pulling force through the swing. But the right arm, the injured arm, plays a critical role in extension and follow-through. Serious damage to the right biceps does not just affect his ability to pitch. It has the potential to affect every single at-bat he takes until this injury is properly healed and rehabilitated. From a competitive standpoint, what does the absence of Ohtani from the mound even temporarily mean for a Dodgers rotation that has been leaning heavily on his presence to anchor the most important starts of the season? The honest answer is that no rotation in baseball is fully prepared to absorb the loss of a pitcher performing at the level Ohtani has been performing at this season. His ERA, his strikeout numbers, his ability to give the team deep into games while keeping the opposing lineup completely off balance, all of that represents a standard of pitching that simply cannot be replicated by any single replacement option available to the Dodgers. What the organization can do is distribute the burden across multiple arms, manage the bullpen more aggressively in the starts that Ohtani would have made, and trust that the depth of their roster gives them enough collective quality to remain competitive while their ace recovers. Roberts' decision to keep this injury under wraps raises a broader question about the relationship between transparency and competitive necessity in professional baseball. On one side of that question is the argument that teams have a legitimate interest in managing information about player health carefully. Opponents adjust their game plans based on what they know about opposing players. If the Dodgers had publicly disclosed early signs of this biceps issue weeks ago, every team on their schedule would have had the opportunity to factor that information into their preparation. On the other side of that argument is the fundamental principle that fans, media, and the broader public have a reasonable expectation of honest communication from organizations about the health status of their players. Roberts' apology suggests that he personally believes the organization did not strike the right balance between those competing interests. And that acknowledgement matters. What is the realistic timeline for a pitcher of Ohtani's caliber to return to full competitive readiness following serious biceps damage of this nature? This is the question that every Dodgers fan is asking right now, and the honest answer is that it depends entirely on the specific nature and extent of the damage revealed by the MRI. Biceps injuries in pitchers exist on a spectrum that ranges from inflammation and minor tearing that can be managed conservatively with rest and rehabilitation all the way to complete rupture that requires surgical intervention and an extended recovery period measured in months rather than weeks. The Dodgers medical staff will be working with Ohtani and his personal medical team to determine the most appropriate course of treatment based on the specific findings of the MRI. Until that process is complete and a treatment plan has been established, any timeline for his return is genuinely uncertain. Shohei Ohtani has carried the Los Angeles Dodgers on his back this season in a way that goes beyond statistics and beyond individual performance. He has been the heartbeat of this organization. The player around whom everything else has been organized. The presence that makes every other player on this roster better simply by being in that clubhouse and on that field every single day. When that presence is suddenly threatened by a serious injury at the most critical point of the season, the impact is felt far beyond the box score of any individual game he misses. It is felt in the confidence of his teammates. It is felt in the calculations of every opposing manager in the league. And it is felt in the hearts of every fan who has watched this extraordinary human being rewrite the definition of what a baseball player can be. Roberts said he was sorry for keeping it under wraps. That apology is not just about this injury. It is about the trust that exists between an organization and the people who care most deeply about everything that organization represents. The Dodgers owe their fans the truth now. And the truth is that Ohtani is hurt, the damage is serious, and the road back is uncertain. How this organization and how Ohtani himself navigate what comes next will define not just the rest of this season but the legacy of one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of this sport.